Happy Bitcoin Saturday, freaks. It's your host, Odell, here for another Citadel Dispatch, the live interactive show focused on actionable Bitcoin and freedom tech discussion. We have a great group of guys here at the Bitcoin TV studios at Bitcoin Park for today's show. But before we get started, I want to thank all the listeners for continuing to support the show. Dispatch is audience funded without ads or sponsors, and it's made possible thanks to the gracious donations from all of you. I really do appreciate it. It means the world, and it's just pretty cool seeing all the donations come in. Couldn't do it without you guys. The easiest way to support the show is through podcasting 2.0 apps like Fountain, Breeze, Podverse.fm, and others. You simply search Citadel Dispatch, press the subscribe button, load up your wallet with Bitcoin, and then you choose how many sats per minute you think the show is worth, and those sats get streamed directly to my node as you listen. Podcasting 2.0 also has a feature called Boostergrams, where you're able to attach a message to a set amount of sats. I read the top 4 boostergrams from the last show every episode. Before I do that, I also want to say you can also support the show through citadeldispatch.com/donate through Lightning or on-chain Bitcoin. We're a Bitcoin-only show here, so the only way to support the show is through Bitcoin. I do know it's a recession. I do know it's a bear market, kind of. I think we're almost out of it. So if you can't spare Bitcoin, you can also support the show by just searching for it and subscribing for the show on your favorite platform. We're on all the platforms, every podcast app, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, Rumble, Bitcoin TV. You just search Citadel Dispatch. All the links are at citadeldispatch.com. And then last but not least, sharing it with friends and family. It really does go a long way. Leaving reviews helps. But then also we are very unique here that we have a live interactive audience that gets piped in through YouTube, Twitch, and our Matrix chat. Our Matrix chat is 24/7, 365 chat focused on freedom tech. You can find that at citadeldispatch.com/chat. So participating in the show is huge. I consider you guys all co-hosts, so thank you for constantly coming into the live show and joining us. So with all that said, I just want to read the last top 4 boostergrams from last week. Well, not last week. It was a little bit ago, but last episode. We have at Nakamoto6102 with 60,000 sats saying, thanks for the discussion. As a prosecutor and regular listener to the show, I can say the culture within prosecutor offices is changing. Bitcoin and open source tools are important and used mostly by law-abiding citizens. I don't know anything about Roman's case beyond what was discussed. Even assuming the charges are true, decades in prison is more time than many murderers will serve. I hope there's justice in this case. I agree with you, Nakamoto6102. We have at Faded Flage with 56,789 sats saying, don't worry about the audio quality. I found episode 100 both riveting and terrifying. Cheers to that. We have at Eric99, 50,000 sats saying, stay humble, stack sats. Really great advice, Eric99. Appreciate the support. And then we have at Stimmy with 50,000 sats saying, free Roman. Free Roman is right. Cheers to that. So with all that said, I have a highly relevant conversation lined up for us today. We have the mempool.space team here in the studio, here to talk about Mempools, talk about transaction fees, and talk about their project, the Mempool open source project and the mempool.space instance that they host. As you freaks are probably aware, if you've used Bitcoin at all these last 2 weeks, Mempools have been running hot. There's been a backlog of Bitcoin transactions. Transaction fees have been high as a result. Bitcoin is working as designed. It is beautiful to watch. And I think this conversation could be very helpful to people that have just experienced that maybe for the first time if they weren't around in 2017. So with all that said, I want to introduce our great guests. We have Wiz here. How's it going, Wiz?
Good morning, Matt. I'm very happy to be here, as always.
Pleasure to have you, as always. We have Steve here. How's it going, Steve?
It's great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Cheers to that. And we have Soft Simon. How's it going, Simon?
Going well. Thank you for inviting us and being in studio this time.
It's fun being in the studio, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And then we also have a live studio audience. He's shaking his head at me, but he has a mic here and he might speak at a random point throughout the episode. If you have anything to say, feel free to say it at any time. He's just shaking his head at me. He's not very happy with me saying that. I guess before we get started, I mean, it's a nice Saturday morning here in Nashville. I know Wiz and Steve have been to the park before, but Simon, like, what are your thoughts on Bitcoin Park?
Great place. Nashville is so beautiful as an American city compared to like New York and Miami and those places I've visited as well. And just co-working space for Bitcoiners. It's an amazing idea.
So a little bit more than just co-working though, right?
Yeah, it's a meetup space, meeting space. What I've seen so far, and it's been cool.
It's weird. I like it's like a social club mixed with co-working, and then we have all the events in the event space. Then we have this ridiculous podcast studio that's completely overkill. That hopefully we'll take more advantage of, have a better setup. Wiz is actually, besides his love of all things Mempools and running servers, he also really loves audio and video stuff. So he actually gets kind of mad at me about how my setup is here.
Well, I'm not a professional podcaster, but
there you go. Neither am I, apparently. So boys, where should we? Where do you want to start here? We got a very active audience. Mempools have been running hot. Do you want to start? Should we start talking about Mempools first, and then we'll go to your project? Or
what's a mempool, Simon?
Yeah, sure. What do people want to know, you think? What is on people's mind right now?
Well, maybe let's start with introducing the project for those who are not familiar. Like, what is mempool.space? Yeah.
What is Mempool.space, Wiz?
All right. Mempool.space is a website that Soft Simon first created in 2018, and sometime in 2019, I messaged him and said, "Let's make an open source project out of this." So in mid 2019, we co-founded the Mempool open source project on GitHub and Twitter, and made all the accounts, and we switched the mempool.space website to our servers. And that's around the time we started to work on it and build it from the original version, which was just the blocks component, which you see on the Mempool.space website, visualizing the mempool as projected blocks, and then slowly adding more and more functionality until it was a full-blown block explorer. And then about 2.5 years ago, we incorporated it into an actual startup. So now Mempool.space is a company funding the development of the Mempool open source project. And we added a mining dashboard. We added a Lightning Explorer. We added all kinds of really cool functionality, which I'm sure we'll get into on the show. And the concept is to help the Bitcoin community transition into a multi-layer ecosystem, and also support very easy one-click installation on a number of Raspberry Pi devices and installations like Umbrel and Raspberry Blitz. So you can go to the Umbrel App Store and click install and have your very own instance of the Mempool.space website running on your own hardware. So we very against trusted third parties, and we're very much for self-sovereignty, and we're very much for the Bitcoin community to support them with this project.
Awesome. I mean, anyone who's been watching Citadel Dispatch should be well aware of mempool.space, because it is live on your screens right now. Like, that is every dispatch has a live view of mempool.space. I consider it essentially the homepage of Bitcoin. It's the place where you can see what the current status is of the Bitcoin network, your Bitcoin transactions. As you said, you've added now the Lightning dashboard and the mining dashboard, so you can see status updates there. But it's also incredibly cool that you can also self-host it and use it with your own Bitcoin node. So we don't have to actually trust you to be giving us relevant, giving us honest information, right?
Yeah, you shouldn't trust us. You should run your own instance of the Mempool open source project on your own hardware. Trusted third parties are security holes. And we want to make it easy for everyone to do it. Because if mempool.space got attacked or censored or went down for whatever reason, you can always rely on your own locally self-hosted instance.
Right. So I mean, we have some interesting questions here. So that's the mempool.space project and the Mempool open source project as just a quick overview. But I think it's important for us to take it back a step and talk about what are mempools, and why are they important.
Yeah, so it's a core feature of the Bitcoin network that there's a block every 10 minutes and there's a scarce block space. Before, up till 2017, it was 1 megabyte, and now it's up to 4 megabytes, depending on what kind of data you put in. But the mempool is where all transactions end up before they get confirmed on the blockchain. And the mempool right now is this fee market or block space market for space in the blockchain. So all transactions are competing to get into the next block, and the miners follow incentives, economic incentives. They always pick the most economically good transactions for them.
Like the highest fee
The highest fee usually is the highest fee, but there's a lot of complexity to that because there can be a lot of relationships in the transactions. Like if you include a low fee, you can also get this high fee. So there's a lot of complexity in how they pick the transactions, which is what we are working on very hard on figuring out. But yeah, so the mempool is basically where your transaction end up before it's getting confirmed. And when you setting out a transaction onto the Bitcoin network, it's starting to spread out along the P2P network of Bitcoin nodes around the world until it reaches a node that it's owned by a miner, and the miner grabs transaction from their own Bitcoin node, right? And this is also why not all mempools are the same, because there's lag and delay in propagation, and the mempools are using completely different rules. For example, there's the memory size limit, which is default on, I think, 300 megabytes, but obviously we have a much higher limit so that we can show more transactions.
You have no limit, right?
Yeah, we have a limit that we keep raising. It's like raising the debt ceiling.
You just keep raising the debt ceiling.
Yeah. So my point is that not all the mempools are the same. So you can have one transaction showing up on one mempool, not the other.
So I mean, it gets a little bit confusing because I'm gonna nitpick here a little bit.
Sure.
It gets so the way I look at mempools are that it's essentially a waiting list to get into the Bitcoin blockchain. It's, or like if you're international, it's a queue to get into the Bitcoin blockchain. It's like you're waiting to get into a busy restaurant, but instead of it being sorted by who gets there first, it's usually sorted by who's paying the most in transaction fees. So we have this dynamic transaction fee market. That is a proper free market. It's people bidding to get into this scarce block space, and then miners are economically incentivized to essentially try and include the ones that make them the most money. But it gets a little bit confusing because so many people in this space, even people that focus on mempools all the time, constantly say the mempool. Now there is no the mempool, right? Every node, every Bitcoin node is running their own mempool. This own waiting list that they're keeping locally, and so it's important to realize, like we have a question in the chat, how many mempools are there? And you can think about it that pretty much everyone that is running a node has their own mempool. Now, not all of these mempools are necessarily economically relevant. The most important mempools might be the miners' mempools, because they're the ones actually creating the transaction. And then obviously your guys' mempool is held in high regard because we all tend to go and check mempool.space. But that's your mempool. It's not the mempool, right?
Yeah, there's the Mempool open source project, and there's the official instance of the Mempool open source project, mempool.space, which a lot of Bitcoin projects do integrate with in some way, shape, or form, like wallets and exchanges and mining pools all integrate with us. But at the end of the day, if we disappeared, Bitcoin would continue operating just fine. Or just another mempool.
Just another mempool.
But the mempool queue you're talking about, it is it's what we are trying to visualize. When you go to mempool
Right.
space, what you see to the left, the blocks, the yellow blocks, currently they're yellow because they're the colors indicating the level of the fee. Green is the lowest. The
You
red,
guys do a great job with the colors. By the way.
yeah. So what you see to the left are the blocks that are waiting to get confirmed,
Right,
and
we can
the
see it on
highest
your
fee
shirt.
to the right.
You have it on your shirt too.
Yeah, that's
that's a special green block edition.
Yeah, so the green here is the very low fee.
Yeah, so the Mempool open source project is kind of like our passion project. I mean, Simon and I have had many passionate arguments over the years about what features to add or what colors to use or what, placement of this pixel here or this thing. And fortunately, now that the mempool is full, we're getting a lot more people using it and a lot of people contributing it. It's really taken off.
Yeah.
I mean, when the mempool is empty, nobody really cared.
When mempools are empty.
Oh.
I feel like it's important not to keep saying the mempool because it confuses people. Like it sets us back. It's important to make it very clear that there's many mempools. And I have Narwhal Tacos, Ride or Die Freak, and great name in the live chat saying that I should go fuck myself because I called his mempool irrelevant. I need to just be clear here. Your mempool is not irrelevant. The most important part about your own mempool is being able to, on your own, make a calculation on what fee you should be paying. Now, Bitcoin Core doesn't have the best fee estimation strategy, and we can talk about how the Mempool open source project does fee estimation and how mempool.space does fee estimation. But if you're running your own mempool instance with your own node and your own mempool, you're able to make very educated decisions on what fee you should choose, right? Because that is something that people take for granted in low transaction environments. But as soon as you start to see sustained high fees, it becomes very important and can be a very expensive mistake to figure out what is the right fee that I want to pay for a transaction, right?
Yeah, the term transaction fee is actually a little bit confusing. I feel it's more like a bid for space in the Bitcoin blockchain. And whenever miners are considering which transactions to include in the next block, they're going to essentially look at the market of bids and take the highest bids, the highest bidding transactions. And nowadays you can actually increase your bid by using RBF or CPFP or other methods. And the miners are constantly looking at this. So when Matt says, if you're just an individual pleb at home running like your own mempool, it's irrelevant. What I think he meant was that in terms of the actual market for demand in the Bitcoin blockchain, the most economically relevant mempools are the ones operated by the mining pool operators or any exchanges or wallets. I mean, essentially anybody who uses the node makes that node trusted. And so if an entire exchange is using a single node, then that node is very economically relevant.
Your own mempool is relevant to you, but
Right.
it's not necessarily.
Yeah. So if you make
I don't want the freaks to get stuck on that. Like you should have your own mempool.
Oh, yeah.
You should be using your own mempool.
But your node is for you.
Yeah.
And if you change your mempool configuration to have a larger mempool or a smaller mempool, or if you filter out some transactions from your mempool, or if you turn off your mempool entirely, only the people using that node would be affected or care about those changes. It's kind of interesting now, like recently we've seen some certain types of transactions where people are filtering them out from their mempool.
Yeah.
And it's kind of silly because if nobody's using your node, then filtering out transactions from your mempool is not going to be noticed by anyone, and nobody would care, right?
Oh, someone just brought that up. Like, are you talking about or disrespecter?
For example,
Yes.
I mean, you can turn off your mempool, like nobody's going
Right.
to care, right? Like you're only hurting yourself.
Yeah, you're gonna get inaccurate fee estimations and inaccurate. Yeah.
Like you want as
estimate
much data as possible.
Yeah.
If you're just ignoring transactions on your own node, that's a relay level thing, right? And those transactions can just be sent to miners directly or sent through someone else's node. And what happens is you get an incomplete picture of the queue, so you don't know what fees to pay, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like it's a bit silly because obviously you can't filter out the Bitcoin blockchain, and those transactions are making it into the blocks. So what are you really accomplishing by, turning off your mempool or filtering
You're
out?
saving some memory on your computer.
You're kind of putting a
But
blindfold on
you're-
your face too, right? Like you don't really know
Yeah.
what's going on.
Right.
You're gonna end up saving those things that you're trying to avoid when the blocks are confirmed anyway. So I don't know.
Yeah. Maybe you don't care about the mempool, you just care about the blockchain. So then you'll save some.
I mean, if you want to be able to do 1 sat per vbyte transactions, just delete your mempool. Okay, great. Your mempool's empty. You can make 1 sat per vbyte transactions, but nobody's going to accept them, right? You want as much data as possible so you have the most accurate view of what everybody else's node is doing.
Right. Steve, you got something to say, or?
No, I'm good.
No, I thought I saw you raising your mic.
Well, actually, before I was gonna say that I think you covered it already, but when you run a node on the network, even though it may not be economically viable in the form of being a node that's used for mining, you are still helping propagate transactions to miners.
Right.
So,
Right. You're helping the relay network, the global relay network, sending these transactions around from node to node to node to node, and then eventually to a miner's node. I think it's important to mention that Narwhal Tacos said that his mom says his mempool is the best one ever, and I support her in that.
That's great.
But so I mean, we've had a very high fee market this last week and a half. At one point, I think the next block was like 400 sats per byte or something like
500.
500.
So 600.
You look a little bit broken inside, Simon.
500-600. No, I don't mind.
And how many outstanding transactions do we have? It was like
It was 500K, I think.
I think 560,000, something like that.
And the last record I checked from 2017 or 18, early 18, was 250, something like that.
But they were larger transactions.
True.
No, this
Right.
This was back in 20. Yeah, so it's
like 2017. I felt like
So the difference now we had so many tiny transactions,
right,
so it wasn't
because they were all the
size.
token shitcoin transactions.
Yeah, so they're like dust and they're very small, but this put a lot of strain.
But the number of transactions was very high.
So it put a lot of strain on our infrastructure and a lot of other Bitcoin infrastructure, which we saw which caused various disturbances. I mean, we had increase of stale blocks or orphan blocks, for example.
Yeah, so let's talk about this, because I mean, part of the reason that I'm so bullish on Bitcoin is that I consider it an anti-fragile system. So I think it gets stronger under pressure when people start to see the pain points.
Yeah.
And we start to fix those problems because those pain points become obvious and there's strong incentives to fix them. So what were the pain points? What are the takeaways? Like, how do we improve going forward?
We've seen in the past, like 17, when we had the first really huge backlog of transactions and high transaction fees, how the years after that, 2018, 19, 20, how exchanges changed and prioritized different techniques to optimize for the block space market, like batching transactions, SegWit support. And I think we've seen the same thing this time. And just we ourselves, this mempool was a real stress test for us. We saw how stuff started to slow down and we had to patch and optimize. So we're much more prepared now for the next wave than we were like a month ago. And you saw various actors like Binance, they tweeted that they're gonna prioritize Lightning support, and so you had these consequences, right?
Right. The batching was the big one.
Yeah, in 2018, I think batching was the huge
And
one.
I remember Coinbase specifically, they were in a situation where they were not doing like any kind of real UTXO management in 2017, and a bunch of their transactions, like people, I think it's important for people to realize that on-chain Bitcoin transactions, the fee is not set by the amount of Bitcoin you're sending. It's not set by the amount of money you're sending. It's set by the amount of data that's being transmitted. So you can have a very small UTXO, a small Bitcoin unspent transaction output, that is going to use the same amount of fee as a UTXO that has much more Bitcoin in it. And as a result, that fee starts to creep up in percentage, right? As a percentage of the transaction. And you have a situation where some of your transactions might not be economically spendable because the transaction fee will be such a large portion, if not the entire portion, of the amount of Bitcoin you have. So you need to have proper UTXO management in order to handle that situation. Now, we have Lightning now that we didn't have in 2017. And the dichotomy that people don't realize, I think, and it's hard to wrap your head around, is Lightning, those transaction fees are based on the amount of money you're sending, not like size and data. So that's actually, on Lightning, that is more comparable to what people are used to, I think. Like Western Union robs you, but you understand that it's a percentage of the amount of money you're sending, right? Like Western Union might charge you 10% of your $100, and like that, it scales with how much money you're sending. That's how Lightning works. But on chain, it's how much data you're sending across the network, right?
Yeah.
But what's really interesting here is I think most of the exchange market has realized that, at least like these professional custodial wallets, essentially, like they realize that they need to have proper UTXO management to a degree. I mean, Binance consolidation transactions weren't confirming; they were having some issues.
It seems like everyone goes through the same mistakes, and a lot of people are using even custodial wallet providers who have figured it out.
But it's interesting to see how many players in the Bitcoin space that think that we're gonna have low fees forever. So they build their whole infrastructure around low fees, and then when the fees just gets raised a little bit, they get hammered, and their service just stops working.
But then they learn their lesson because they touch the stove, right?
Yeah, because I think everyone in this room
bankrupt.
have understood very early on, like, oh shit, the fees are going to get really high. Like when we start building the mempool, we knew that this is going to be super relevant because the mempool is going to be full. Everyone's going to check what's the fee, where's my transaction.
Yeah, everyone. Shout out to Catan. Everyone seems to think that they can always do a 1 sat per VByte transaction and just wait, but that's not the case.
I'm almost surprised that it's been this slow and that we had empty blocks going for the past
we've definitely been wrong,
because the block space is so scarce. It's like the scarcest resource in the world, right? Isn't it?
Besides time.
Right, okay.
If you want to get philosophical.
So you can store anything on the blockchain, like NFTs or your anything. You can store anything, and it's going to be locked in forever in this database.
It's going to outlast all of us.
Oh yeah. Just that concept should be super valuable, but still,
Bitcoin has introduced 2 forms of digital scarcity, and most people only think about one of them. Obviously, everyone knows that there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin.
Wait, really? Sorry, continue.
But the second thing is that the space in Bitcoin's blockchain is equally scarce, and whenever you need to.
And why is block space scarce?
Well,
why does it have to be scarce? Why can't we just have, unlimited block size?
Let me tell you.
It's related to the cost of operating a node. So we want to keep the cost of operating nodes as low as possible so that you can literally just use a low-powered Raspberry Pi device and keep the number of nodes out there as high as possible to avoid centralization.
Keep it as accessible as possible to use your own node.
Right. In theory, I mean, you could even run a full node on your phone.
Right.
If the phone has enough space.
There are a lot of misconception around why we can't raise the block size, which is causing a lot of conspiracy theories about various players trying to keep Bitcoin crippled or whatever. But and some people refer to that we have low cost hard drives today. It doesn't matter if we have 20 megabyte to 200 megabyte blocks, and internet speeds are higher. But to forget that what Wiz was mentioning is just operating the node, also including downloading a node from scratch, verifying the blocks from scratch.
Verifying all the
if you're onboarding a new merchant to Bitcoin, setting up the BTC server, setting up the node, it shouldn't take more than a couple of days to sync the blockchain and get up to speed. If we just increase the block size from the current 2 megabytes to 20 megabytes and just let it grow, in just 5-10 years, it's gonna take a month just to download and verify.
And then everyone's using trusted third parties because to interact with the Bitcoin network.
So that's the dangerous part. And there are people like Luke Dash that claims it's already too high today. We should reduce it because the way it's growing right now, and just this. Okay, I'm mentioning the word ordinal transaction.
You can mention it.
Thing we've seen the past months have increased the blockchain by I think 20 gigabyte
Right.
of just this kind of.
But that's why we have the block size cap. That's why there's a
Yeah. And it's great to see that they had to pay this much of fees. And I saw they burned like 600 bitcoins.
They
or
paid for
something like
security of the Bitcoin network.
Yeah.
As they should.
So absolutely. So I'm glad that they're not paying anything and just paying 1 sat per V byte and not allowed to just fill up the blockchain. So they have economic disincentive to use worthless stuff. So they actually
it has to be worth it to them for the Bitcoin they
spend. So hopefully it will be more towards value transfer in the future, I hope.
It's an economic incentive to be more efficient using scarce block space. But Simon, I want to unpack this a little bit because, well, first of all, to interact with a Bitcoin node, to interact with the Bitcoin network, you need to use a Bitcoin node. And if you're not using your own Bitcoin node, you have to trust someone else's node, and you're trusting them with you verifying the rules of the network, verifying your transactions, and also your privacy. So it's absolutely integral to the system that it's accessible to use your own node. And we see in shitcoin land all the time that they have not prioritized this. So most people are using someone else's node, and different shitcoins have different levels of centralization along that axes or whatever, that trade-off balance. But we see like heavy centralization in shitcoin land. And the problem is once you go down that path, you can never really come back from it.
Yeah.
Now, Simon, me and you went back and forth on Twitter. The common misconception straight up is that it's a question of storage. It is not a question of storage at all. Storage is cheap. That is not the bottleneck. Now, I said the bottleneck is bandwidth. You said like actual data transmission. You said internet speeds are very high. That's not the bottleneck. The bottleneck is actual validation, verification of transactions. To me, it's a combination of both.
Yeah, I agree.
And I would say the number one reason on the bandwidth side is because you want to be able to use a node through a Tor, I think. So it's like, okay, our internet might be great at Bitcoin Park on ClearNet, or, the internet, might be great in Tokyo, Nashville, New York, like all these great cities or whatever. But the problem is if we are in an adversarial environment, some people, some places in the world, it might be a crime just to run a Bitcoin node. And they should be able to run a node, in my opinion, privately, where they're not doxing that they're running a node to their internet provider, their government, or whoever they're worried about, right?
Yeah.
And Tor has horrible bandwidth restrictions, right? Like it's just a very high latency network. It's hard to transfer large amounts of data through it, right? So that's where I kind of come at from the bandwidth side.
Yeah, I agree.
It's probably a combination of the two.
Like if you have low enough block size, you could sync it from your phone as well over 4G or something, and also in developing countries with lower internet speeds.
Right.
So I agree on that point as well.
Yeah, but recently we saw the CPU is becoming bottleneck for very computationally expensive transactions, and also for transactions in the mempool when there's so many of them, like over 500,000 transactions in the mempool. The CPU and we haven't even talked about the mempool size limit. We've only mentioned the block size limit so far.
Right.
But the mempool size limit is also very relevant because a lot of people
want 300 meg default.
Right. A lot of people want to increase the size of their mempool so that they can hold lower fee transactions. But the trade-off of that is the increased CPU load on the node that's running this larger mempool. And it's not a linear, it's a non-linear scaling. So the more transactions you have, the more that your CPU has to analyze the relationships between all those transactions. And so doubling the amount of the size of your mempool from 300 megabytes to 600 megabytes doesn't just require 2x CPU, but much more.
Not exponential, but not linear.
More like log or something. Yeah. And so it depends on what transactions are in the mempool. So it's not
in Mempools. Yeah.
Right. In your mempool.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have these large clusters of CPFP, child pay for parent transactions. That there's so many relationships, and as the mempool grows, and you have more of these clusters that are integrate together. And when you run the calculation to get the most profitable block, it requires a lot of resources.
It can also be detrimental to have a bigger mempool than the default size, because if transactions are purged from most nodes with a 300 megabyte default limit, and you keep them, then when those transactions are rebroadcast, then your node won't like propagate them
because it already sees
because it
the
already has them.
transaction.
Yeah.
So let's talk about transactions being purged, right? So I have mempool.space up right now. You have a larger than average mempool, but you, as a result, you tell people what
Well, we
fee
run
level gets purged on a default mempool, right?
we run 2 nodes. So one node has a very large mempool and one has a default 300
But
megabytes
you run way more than 2 nodes, right?
per server.
Yeah.
So
I've seen the list of nodes; it's pretty crazy.
Right, but I mean, like within one server, we have a big node and a small node, and
Yes.
this way we can determine which transactions have been purged from the default 300 megabytes.
Okay, so right now it's at 7.34 sats per byte. Anything under that is getting purged. That number was way higher. At one point, it was like 50 sats per byte this week.
Right.
So what happens? What happens when a transaction gets purged from the mempools?
Well, it depends on which mempool.
Yeah, I was trying to answer this question the other day, and it's a very complex one because what happens at first, it obviously gets kicked out from all the mempools that run default limit, right? But then it's the question is when the mempool goes down again, how does it get back to the to everyone's mempool? Does it get rebroadcasted? It depends on who's sitting on that transaction. If they make a rebroadcast, so usually I think it's the wallet that actually originally created the transaction that will try to rebroadcast, and it can depend on the wallet. And sometimes you have to do it automatically. I saw in Electrum, for example, that I've been using, that your transaction is just changed to, it just says local. Like this transaction just exists locally in your wallet all of a sudden, instead of actually on the remote mempool on the server that I'm connected to. So I have to like rebroadcast it myself, or I'm not sure if it's
it depends on the wallet implementation. I think Bitcoin Core will automatically rebroadcast it.
Yeah.
There's also random people on the Bitcoin network that will just rebroadcast transactions.
They hold a larger mempool.
Like we do that sometimes.
But we can see that when we had a fee spike and then it goes down, that after a few hours we suddenly see all these transactions just
because someone's rebroadcasting.
Yeah, just getting rebroadcasted. But we also have people who are complaining their transaction got just disappeared and it never got rebroadcasted, and they ask what happened with that transaction. So there are cases when it does not get rebroadcasted.
Well, I think it's important to realize that if you send a transaction that is too low of a fee and it gets dropped from most mempools, it's not like you can lose your Bitcoin. It's not that it gets sent back to your wallet. It never left your wallet.
Yeah.
But you'll essentially see that Bitcoin back in your wallet, and then you can either rebroadcast if you know what you're doing, or you can just create a new transaction at whatever fee rate you want to do, right? Like, I think it's like people start to get freaked out. They're like, did I just lose my Bitcoin? Like, you don't lose your Bitcoin in that situation.
It's kind of the opposite of getting confirmed, right? It's the opposite of getting mined into a block. You've just been, that transaction has just been...
I think the UX of this whole issue is a little bit underdeveloped because we didn't have this problem in the past. So Bitcoin Core or the consensus rules isn't really made for this kind of scenario where your transaction just disappears and gets kicked out. And then, so hopefully in the coming years, we'll see more of this kind of support from Core.
Well,
and the infrastructure in general.
Bitcoin Core as a wallet will handle everything quite well, but
wallets might
like
not.
Nobody really uses Bitcoin Core as a wallet. Everyone's using...
There's like a dozen people.
It's like an app on your phone, and whoever developed that wallet app that you're using didn't have to implement. They didn't implement all of these nuanced things. So it's only really like the OG wallets that took a lot of time. And that's
I think Blue Wallet handles it really well.
Yeah,
on your phone for a mobile wallet, because like they have integrated RBF features. They have integrated child pays for parent features.
Yeah, I checked Sparrow Wallet. I was playing it around the past few days, and it has, when you right click on a transaction, you can RBF it, you can CPFP it.
Sparrow
you can cancel it. It's the same with Electrum. But in the past, you had a lot of wallets who did not care about upgrading to either SegWit, RBF, all these good features that are super important in this kind of fee environment. You need to be able to bump your transaction.
Right. I mean, I had Sergey on the show from BitRefill, and like we all live in a bubble, right? We
Yeah.
think like
Oh, yeah.
people are using Sparrow. We think people are using like Blue Wallet. We think they're using all these top of the line wallets. But really, the overwhelming majority of people are using, like Binance's Trust Wallet and just blockchain.info's wallet, like just the shittiest wallets that don't have any of these real features set up. And then they get in these high fee environments, they get really fucked over.
Yeah, that's true. Well, the oldest wallets that were first to market that just have a ton of users, it's so sad. They like care the least about their users.
Well, they also get like a little bit ossified, right? They get kind of stuck in their ways because they have so many users.
Yeah, and we have so many new great wallets, so much new innovation, like Sparrow Wallet, that just blew everything else out of the water, and hopefully everyone will.
Yeah, shout out to Craig. Thanks for making such a great wallet. I mean, I don't own Bitcoin, but if I did, I would use Sparrow Wallet.
Yeah.
I use Sparrow, but it's always in testnet mode.
You said that so nonchalantly. Let's talk about child pays for parent. Let's talk about RBF. What are they? What are the different trade-offs? Why should people care?
Sure. So RBF is a great feature that allows you to replace an existing transaction that's in the mempool, as long as you increase the fee. So if you're using a Bitcoin wallet like Blue Wallet, Green Wallet, Electrum, Sparrow, all these wallets, you make a transaction, it's falling behind in the mempool queue in one of the mempools. You want to increase the fee, you can just click RBF, and the fee, the mempool, the transaction is replaced, and you don't pay any extra because you can replace like as many times you want,
right?
Virtually, there's a limit to it, but you can replace it.
What is the limit?
There's some kind of limit to prevent spam, so you have to increase.
Otherwise, I could just keep RBFing like
and just increase once.
But it's a high limit.
It's not a limit.
There's a limit how much you have to increase at a certain amount of fee.
A minimum increase.
Minimum.
Oh, so I can't do like 1 Sapperbyte and then 2 Sapperbyte, then 3 Sapperbyte.
Yeah, I think not. So RBF is a good one, but it's only possible if you are the one that created a transaction, that you're the one that signed the original transaction.
Right. I send a transaction to you, and then I can bump the fee at a later time.
Yeah, but if you send me a transaction and it's waiting, or I made a withdrawal from an exchange, if I would use like trusted custodians like Coinbase, and I have a transaction.
Well, like let's say I pay you, but I use 10 sats per byte. It's not getting confirmed. It's sitting there.
And suddenly I urgently need to have this.
You want the Bitcoin?
In my wallet. I want the Bitcoin. Then I can't use RBF because I didn't create the transaction. But I can use CPFP.
Child pays for parent.
Yeah, child pay for parents, which means I take this transaction you sent, and I spend the same coins again.
You take the unconfirmed transaction and you spend from that in a new transaction.
Exactly. So what's
the
happening?
Child transaction is spending, right?
Yeah. So easily explained. Like you send me some coins, I spend the same coins again, and in a new transaction, which will be the child transaction. And let's say you sent me with 10 sats per VByte.
Right.
I'm sending a new transaction, which is 100 sats per VByte. And the miners will look at this and say, oh, if I combine these two transactions,
if I confirm both at the same time,
then I'll get this juicy 100 sat per VByte transaction. So
but you call it on mempool.space, you do really cool. It's effective fee rate.
Effective fee rate. So the effective fee rate is the calculation of, so together, these two together, they are calculated as probably maybe like 50 sats per VByte in the
there's some kind of average that happens there.
Yeah, so there's an algorithm.
Based on the size of both transactions.
Exactly. So they combine the size, how much fee per byte per both, and they will be ordered in the mempool according to that, and the miners will pick that one to earn that high fee.
So if the sender of a transaction wants to increase the fee rate, they use RBF.
Or they could use child pays for parent too. If
they can.
Sender has the option to do both if they have change.
But I wish people
only
to minimize.
The recipient can do CPFP.
No, not if they have change.
Yeah, but that's what
if the sender has change, they can.
But if I just send you an entire UTXO, I cannot CPFP it. Only the recipient of one of the outputs of a transaction can CPFP it.
But sometimes the sender is a recipient of one. Most situations because they have change.
Depends. Like if you're, I don't know, withdrawing from an exchange or something, you couldn't use RBF. But if you're like, say I'm sending to a third party, so I'm the first party, the exchange is the second party. Say I'm sending to the guy sitting on the sofa here. If I send him a transaction, I control neither the private keys that the exchange is sending. Only he can bump it with CPFP because I'm not getting one of those chain.
Right, but if I send from my own Sparrow wallet to
Yes,
you, I
and
can use CPFP, or if I have change.
if you have change,
Only
and most of the time you have change, I can use CPFP or RBF.
Yeah.
But there's no reason for me to use CPFP because it's way less efficient because you have to send another transaction.
but
It's kind of
sometimes
hard
that's
to
your only
conceptualize.
option. If you're the recipient, then you're
If you're the recipient,
Can't
yeah. But if you're
RBF
the
it.
sender, you like RBF is preferable because it's way
Mm.
more efficient, right? You end up paying less in fees.
Yeah,
you
imagine
need all
the
of the-
fees are super high in the network. If it's $10 or $100, you don't want to CPFP and pay another $100 just to get it confirmed. If you,
But it
with RBF,
requires all of the key signers who signed the
Yeah.
original transaction to sign off again on the replacement, which not always possible, right? Depending on the use case.
Right. I mean, the cool thing about RBF to me is it makes a more efficient transaction fee market because people forget until we have high fees that there's many times you're in a situation where you could go to mempool.space, it could say your next block fee, which is just an estimate, and then you put that fee because you want to get confirmed in the next block, and maybe blocks come in a little bit slower, maybe Binance decides to dump a bunch of transactions into Mempools or something, and it starts to run away from you. It's like, okay, 25 sats per byte is next block, but then you're waiting for 6 weeks because it runs away from you. So then what happens in a non-RBF scenario is you see 25 sats per byte is the next block estimated fee, and so instead you pay 60 just to make sure you're in, and you overpay. But because of RBF, you can actually be very deliberate, and you can do that. And then worst comes to worst, you can start bumping it up, and it makes a way more efficient transaction fee market, right?
But you can only bump it up by a minimum of, I think, double or something like that. So it's not.
Yeah.
It's maybe not double, but there's like a minimum increase amount. So it's not like you can just go from 11 sats to 12 sats to 13 sats. You have to go a little bit.
Couchman wants to speak.
Maybe we can mention also that we just
have a caller.
What?
We have a caller. This is a mystery man from Nashville on the line.
So I think there's a very specific situation, to your point, Matt, where you might, as the sender, want to CPFP, and that's if the transaction ID needs to stay the same. So if you were to replace by fee, the TX ID would change. So
and why would you want the TX ID to stay the same?
Well, it's a good question. Sometimes there's very specific use cases where you need that TX ID to stay the same because the recipient is acting on that specific TX ID and they're not looking to update. So it's
that's interesting.
It's a good point.
Or if the change of the original transaction has already been spent, you're now destroying all the child transactions too, right? When you RBF it, the parent.
No one wants to destroy children.
I want to mention the new feature on Mempool.space we just shipped, which is the RBF visualizer.
Mempool.space/RBF.
Oh, that's a secret URL.
No,
Matt.
I'm not thinking about. I'm not talking about.
We'll edit it out before we go live.
Okay,
I'm talking about when you're viewing a transaction, you can see the full history of the replacement transactions. So in the case of someone send you a transaction ID and said, "Hey, here's your transaction," and then they actually replaced it, and this transaction is deleted, and there's a new transaction TX ID, right? But we'll still keep the old one. So if you open the old one, there's just a banner saying
this was replaced by this transaction,
by that one, and you even now see the like a history graph. You can click through the whole history.
Pretty
and
awesome.
See how it's
It's really cool to see multiple transactions replaced by a single transaction.
Yeah, that's a bit cool. I don't know who's doing those or how to do those, but we have those. I mean, most wallets, they will just bump one transaction, right?
Well, sometimes you'll see like literally 100 transactions in the mempool replaced by a single batched transaction that batches them all together.
With RBF.
Which is
really
because
they're using custom software for that. That's like an exchange or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what you can do with RBF is actually changing the inputs and outputs. That's why there's an option in like Sparrow wallet where you can cancel a transaction. So you're replacing your transaction and changing the outputs to pay back to yourself.
Yeah, Blue Wallet has that too. You're not really canceling the transaction. Exactly. You're just replacing it with a transaction that pays yourself instead of the sender.
So calling it cancel is just like a UX thing.
It's very helpful UX because that's what people think of it as. But you're not really canceling the transaction.
Maybe you should start talking a little bit about the full RBF. That's like another can of worm thing.
I feel like the full RBF argument or debate is completely over as soon as high fees came into the picture, right? It's like,
Well, the whole business model of accepting zero conf transactions is kind of, sketch to begin with. And maybe there are some businesses that can manage that risk and evaluate whether they want to accept a certain zero conf transaction based on limits or amounts or fee rates that were used, or maybe they have some other criteria they can use to filter them out. But in a very, very high fee environment, when the mempool is very congested, it becomes
Mempools.
When I say the mempool, I'm referring to my mempool.
Fair enough.
But when it's very congested, like when is that zero conf transaction going to get confirmed? You're taking a huge risk if you ship some goods or services on a zero conf transaction at that point, right?
Right.
I mean, it was never secure.
Right.
It's just during that time when the mempool is completely empty, you can have a higher. I feel like the people listening at home are going to start drinking every time someone says the mempool and Matt corrects them. But yeah, zero conf is not secure, and you probably shouldn't do it. But if you want to, that's your decision.
Should we? What was the full RBF debate? Should we talk about it? Simon wants to talk about it. Does Steve want to talk about it?
Well, we could. I'm curious, like practically how it works right now, because you don't need like every node on the network to have that flag turned on.
Do you guys have it turned on?
We do not.
Why not?
Do not.
We
And
follow the
do you
default
care?
Bitcoin core. I mean,
I
personally,
asked Merch the other day, should we enable full RBF? And he said no.
I called Merch the other day the premier mempool influencer. Do you agree with that statement?
pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think we want the mempool.space website to be as close to default Bitcoin
Yeah.
core as possible.
Right.
Yeah, but like the default should be full RBF, and it's just not because of politics.
That's
But
depends who you
Throw
ask.
your dick around. I got a bad look. I was in when was that RBF debate? It was happening in the fall. I said two things at Austin BitDevs while the debate was happening that angered some people. The first was you all forget that we're going to have high fee markets. You're all sheltered in your very low fee market environment. And as soon as high fee markets happen, we're going to need RBF, and it's super important.
Mhm.
And then the second thing was that it doesn't really matter as much what individual node runners are choosing just because it's a flag that's a toggle to turn it on or not. What really matters is what do the large mempools that are very connected to a lot of people choose,
And the miners.
and what do the miners choose. And I specifically said, I was like, you guys can debate all day long, but it really comes down to what Wiz and Simon decide. And people got pretty mad about that one.
I mean, that's just the reality. If there's one mining pool with a decent amount of hash power that has full RBF enabled, then can you securely accept zero conf transactions? No, right? I mean, it's kind of like the end of the debate. As you said, there's no point in really debating it, because if you turn on full RBF on your home Raspberry Pi node, does anybody care? Does anyone trust your mempool do mining pools like get transactions from your little Raspberry Pi?
Well, we're kind of
Probably not.
seeing it with this or disrespecters thing, right? It's like, I respect the fact that individual Bitcoiners want to do something that they think is right, and feel like they're making actionable change. But it's important to realize that these relay, anything that's done on the relay network side does not change any consensus rules.
Well, Bitcoin is very censorship resistant. If you censor transactions on your node, they're just going to get relayed through other nodes that aren't censoring those transactions. You would literally have to have like near 100% of nodes.
Like, I mean, you remember when Luke early days was like his mempools were filtering based on like what the Bible
Satoshi
said.
Dice or something.
Yeah, he was like no gambling, no porn, no
But in
no
the
eCam sites.
case of the full RBF thing, it's a consensus thing. If everyone just changed their mempool config to enable full RBF, it's going to be much more popular and used and work.
But as long as there's one miner who's not even connected to the Bitcoin network. They could just be mining directions that are directly mining transactions that are directly sent to them,
regardless of full RBF.
Yeah, like they're not even using the P2P network. They can mine whatever they want, right? And that's kind of the
but it was years ago when like Peter Todd showcased this by double spending Coinbase.
Yeah, I remember that.
And then got banned from Coinbase. Because at the end of the day, I mean, RBF could be considered like legal fraud.
I remember doing a demonstration. There was this Bitcoin ATM in Tokyo somewhere that would dispense cash on ZeroConf. And in the high fee environment, that didn't go well
so
for
you
them.
Just bankrupted them, or?
No, I mean,
demonstration.
I mean, it's a small community. Everybody knows everybody. Like, it's more of a demonstration at a meetup type presentation, but you have to realize it's ZeroConf.
We can edit
this
that.
ZeroConf debate has been going on for many, many years. Most from the big blocker side have never understood that if it's not confirmed in blockchain, it's not secure. It can be replaced. You can just, there's so many ways.
It's a very naive approach.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it feels good. It shows up in your wallet, and they want to feel like it's confirmed, but it's just in the mempool. And we have something called the blockchain to solve this problem of double spending.
Bitcoin fixes this.
Yeah, proof of work blockchain.
To play devil's advocate, you could say that the choice to accept ZeroConf, is at the end up to that recipient. And if they think that they can manage that risk, why shouldn't they? So if you're dispensing cash from an ATM at ZeroConf, that's a high risk, and probably eventually you're going to get wrecked. But until you do get wrecked, you're probably making some money, and maybe the trade-off is there. And so long as you don't get wrecked too badly at once.
Bitrefill allows ZeroConf, and they do some kind of analysis.
They do like a fraud analysis.
And if it's a very low amount, it's like worth it. So I think.
And there's. I think there's one thing if you're talking about businesses, but it becomes very obvious when you talk about individuals. Like if Wiz paid me ZeroConf, like I would completely be fine with that, right? Because Wiz is my close friend, and if he wants to commit fraud against me, then like maybe we won't be close friends anymore after that, right? Like that is completely up to the user, and it's important in Bitcoin in general that we have user choice.
Right, but
you have to understand the risks.
Yeah, it's like to go back to the ATM, if you're dispensing cash or shipping some,
you're a fucking idiot,
gold coins on ZeroConf, then you're going to get wrecked pretty quickly, and that's for you to decide.
And you can manage that risk to some degree if you know how much risk you're exposed to at any one time, how much value is in those ZeroConf transactions that you've treated as though they were confirmed. Because if you're only exposing yourself to a small amount of value being at risk at any given time, even if that all immediately gets double spent and you lose $10,000, that might actually be small in comparison to the amount of value that you've accessed. So with Bitrefill, it might be that them having ZeroConf for many years has made them slightly more attractive than their competitor, which has ended up with them making more money than they ever have at risk at any given time.
Sure, but when we're educating newcomers to Bitcoin, I think it's very important to tell them, yes, ZeroConf is not secure. Don't trust it. Verify that.
Well, there's risks. It's a trade-off, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm. What else do you want to talk about? You want to talk about how nobody uses Liquid?
I thought we were talking about Mempools.
I mean, you have a Liquid tab on the mempool.space.
It's a separate website, liquid.network.
You want to talk about? No, I mean, can't you just click the tab on the top?
It links to a different website.
Okay.
So on the Mempool.space website, we have the mining dashboard, the Lightning dashboard, testnet, Signet.
Should we talk about Lightning?
Sure.
Like, what are your thoughts on Lightning, and how do you think about it from both a user on the network, and how do you think about it from an operator of the mempool.space business? Because I mean, you guys just added the Lightning. I mean, what was it, 8 months ago or something?
In Riga and
the Lightning dashboard
or something like that.
Yeah.
And we shipped it for the Raspberry Pi users about a month or two ago.
Because I mean, Lightning is supposed to be the solution here for a Bitrefill or something, right?
For us, launching the Lightning Explorer was a good step, and people can self-host, and it visualizes the graph that they're seeing from their Lightning node, right? But from recently, from an operational perspective, we have been focusing on the on-chain, because who is checking the Lightning dashboard on Mempools space? It's probably only people that are running actively a Lightning node.
Well, what I
And
think is interesting about how you did Lightning is, and people, I think, consistently fail to realize this. At the end of the day, Lightning is a protocol for interoperable batched on-chain payments. It is based in on-chain, like it is anchored in on-chain Bitcoin, and either person in that channel, and like I get into arguments with people that there is no Lightning network. It's really just all these interconnected payment channels, and people might have a different network than other people. It's not like one global. In practice, it kind of becomes one global network, but it's not necessarily that. It's all these different payment channels, and it's kind of interesting how you guys do it on mempool.space and the Mempool open source project, because it becomes very apparent, I think, in that you can't really have a good picture of Lightning without having a strong foundation in on-chain. And you can choose Lightning nodes and you can see their channel closes and their channel opens, and like what are those on-chain transactions that are essentially those payment channels that make the Lightning network, right?
Right. We have built a very strong connection where you can see from which UTXOs open and close channels and that.
Yeah, I think we kind of reinvented the concept of what a Bitcoin Explorer is by implementing multiple layers and having them all integrated tightly together. For example, in the past, there was only really blockchain explorers, and that's because the mempool wasn't really relevant at that time, and layer 2 wasn't relevant at that time. So everyone just focused on the blockchain. But the blockchain is actually just one layer. The way I like to think about it is mempool is kind of like layer 0 when you first broadcast your transaction.
Okay.
And after it gets mined into the blockchain, you're in the layer 1 blockchain.
Okay.
And if that transaction was funding a Lightning channel, you're now in layer 2.
And what layer are you in if you're one of the dozen people who use Liquid?
Well, that's debatable. Merch says Liquid is not a layer 2 network. It's a sidechain, but layer 2 is kind of like a buzzword. I mean, it could mean many, many things.
Got it.
Is a custodial Cash App wallet layer 2? You know,
That's layer 3.
What's layer 3, Simon?
Layer 3 are the apps you build on top of the layer 2.
Well, so I have a question. So, I mean, so if you ask a mainstream Bitcoin influencer on Twitter, why, like when Bitrefill, so Bitrefill is one of the most dominant is one of the most successful Bitcoin businesses, right? They do very good business. Their main business is selling gift cards and selling phone top ups, and they heavily rely on zero comp transactions. And one of the cool things that Sergey does at Bitrefill is he opens up his payments information. Like it feels like almost once a year he goes on stage or comes on Dispatch and it's like, this is the breakdown of my payments. And he accepts shitcoins, he accepts on-chain, he accepts Lightning. He has like this little UX survey-ish thing when you're paying to ask what wallet you're using. So he has like some detail on which wallets people are paying from. And I said earlier, like, I was like, a lot of people are paying with like Trust Wallet, which is a horrible wallet and a horrible name for a wallet because you shouldn't trust a wallet. But so the answer, so when Bitrefill came out and said, you're going to make our fraud detection much more difficult with zero confirmation, and a lot of our users really like zero confirmation, and if you allow mempool operators to relay these transactions when they're not signaling RBF, it makes our fraud situation much more difficult. The mainstream Bitcoin influencer would say, just use Lightning. That is what Lightning's for. You have instant settlement. You have a direct amount that is happening. You don't have to deal with that zero confirmation risk. In a high fee environment, we heard the same thing. Just use Lightning. Now, why? But if you ask Sergey and he gives you the payment breakdown or whatever, Lightning is tiny. Like
5%.
More people are using Tether and Ethereum and all this shit than they're using Lightning.
Yeah.
Now, like as responsible Bitcoiners, like what do we take away from that? Like what are, like, is is Lightning the end all be all? Like, what are the conclusions that we should be taking away from this?
In a sustained high fee environment, Lightning is probably going to become a very, very popular tool, much more than 5% of the payments. But in the past few years, when we were just 1 sat per VByte, then sure, he was
Yeah.
probably getting the majority of his transactions with zero conf on
But at the
chain.
same time, when the fees are very high, that's very costly to open and close channels. So
Yes.
it might halt some adoption because it's too expensive to.
So the way I look at Lightning is I think it has proven itself as a interoperable payment protocol for large custodians. Like, that use case has found product market fit. It works. You have professional node operators like Wallet of Satoshi and Bitfinex and, you know, all these different custodial operators that manage these channels and make the payments relatively seamless for their users. But of course, trusted third parties are security holes. They can rug you at will. You would have to trust them with your privacy. You know, maybe Charming eCash with like these Fedimints or Cashew, like maybe they help that situation a little bit because they can still rug you at will, but they can't see your privacy. But I don't know necessarily if the product market fit has been found on the freedom oriented side, using it in a freedom way. And I think part of that is not only that high fees mean channel creation is more expensive, because that's a fine trade-off, I think. Like, if I can make one like, the whole idea is like, if I make one transaction that opens a 10 million sat channel and I pay my 500 sats per byte, I can then make thousands and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of transactions to and from
That's the
on that.
ideal
But
scenario.
the real burden on freedom-oriented sovereign Lightning usage, because I think everyone, just like we forgot that fees could get high, just like we forgot that FTX could rug people because like Mt. Gox took a while. I think people are in this complacent phase because Wallet of Satoshi has just been running a custodial wallet for fucking years, that every custodian either rugs you or gets shotgun KYC'd and forced KYC'd. Like, that is going to happen. So then why don't we have more freedom-oriented sovereign tools for using Bitcoin on Lightning? And I think the bigger burden is, how do you do mobile, like easy UX? Like, people need convenience. It doesn't matter how many podcasts you have. It doesn't matter how many YouTube hours videos you have. Like, no one's going to watch a 2-hour BTC sessions video before they use this money. And so, like, you need the convenient tools on mobile, and it's not easy. Like, Lightning takes all these trade-offs to maintain its censorship resistance. It's not easy to necessarily use that in a freedom-oriented way on a mobile phone. And it's not easy for developers to implement that, right? Like, there's a reason Trust Wallet, I mean, besides being a completely shit wallet, and I keep going back to it just because so many people use it, they don't even give you, it's not even HD wallet. They just give you a fixed on-chain address, let alone have Lightning enabled. Like, they don't have Lightning enabled. And that's what Sergey will say to you, is like, okay, you can tell me all these things about Lightning, but if like my user is paying from Trust Wallet, like, they're not going to use Lightning, right?
I think the Lightning has these problems that you need channels, you need incoming liquidity to receive and all that. And
oh yeah, the receive side is fucking pain in the
ass. But I think the mobile wallet that solved everything like this the best is still the Phoenix wallet.
Phoenix is awesome
because it just does everything automatic, but it's still, you just back up seed words just like a regular wallet. If you make an on-chain deposit, it automatically swaps into a channel, and then you can start spending Lightning. So,
right. So
so onboarding is super good. You launch the wallet, you back up your seed words, you make an on-chain deposit, you can make a large one, and that one opens a channel, and then you can start spending like thousands of payments for a long period of time.
And they also let you, if you need to receive on Lightning, you can start your Phoenix wallet experience by receiving a Lightning payment from someone, and they'll open a channel on demand for you. I love Phoenix. I have a getting started guide for Phoenix at werunbtc.com/Phoenix. It is fantastic wallet. One of the cool things about Phoenix, which I really appreciate from their team, is if you go to their website, they list all the trade-offs very clearly in like human English, not like bullshit. And it's important to realize though, like even on Phoenix, you don't have good privacy
Right.
from Phoenix. And Phoenix, as a result, you're not just trusting Phoenix. Their servers could get compromised, or they can get compelled by governments. They can get a gun put to their head the good old-fashioned way and say, "Give us your information." So
Right.
you don't have good privacy. And then second of all, and it's a taboo subject. We can't really talk about it as Bitcoiners, but I like talking about the taboo subjects. And it goes back to this idea of what is custodial and what is not custodial. And I think like the relationship you have with Phoenix and Async, which is the parent company of Phoenix, they have their own Lightning implementation. It is not, and there's so much nuance here, which makes it difficult. It's different than using a light wallet on chain, where like you're just giving up your privacy and verification, and maybe they could specifically double spend you, but it is self custody very easy. On Phoenix, I wouldn't call it pure self custody. Like there's a trust relationship there. They can rug you if
But only
they
while
try to rug you, right?
like when the HTLC is in transit or something like this,
They can rug you while you're receiving a
they're
payment.
basically receiving it, and then 2 seconds later they open the channel to you and send the funds to you.
But they're also like
You would realize that right away. Like,
but the
yeah, I
only
didn't get
node
it,
you're
right?
connecting to is their node,
Right,
Right. Yeah,
and
because
your app is usually offline.
right.
Like I'm pretty sure they can steal your money if they want it.
Well, because like your phone could be off or out of signal or something, and so then they would save it for you, and then whenever your phone came back online, it would connect to their server, and then you would receive the
yeah,
funds.
it's like a trust minimized.
It's a good trade-off
way.
though, right?
And when using this wallet, you're using their LSP and their what's it called, the trampoline routing.
your
so,
channel
so
partner.
they are keeping the graph of the Lightning Network. This is why when you make a payment with Phoenix, it usually goes confirm like within just 1 second.
It's their graph and their
because you're just outsourcing this stuff to their server. And like you said, you can't connect it to any other node. It's reliant on the server, but you still own the keys, so you can close the channels and get it on chain if you want to. If their service got raided by
if they go out of
FBI
business or something like that.
Yeah, something like that. But
if they wanted to actively attack you, they can probably steal your money.
But the alternative to Phoenix is like a more self-custody, where you actually control where you open your channels and stuff. And I would recommend the Blixt wallet.
Blixt is awesome.
And they just got a grant from Human Rights Foundation to develop. It's just been a one-man team.
I'm gonna try and get him a grant from OpenSats too.
Oh yeah, they should.
I felt bad because he put an application in, and
I saw
the application was lost.
Yeah,
so I told him
was
to
bad.
resubmit. We had a bad couple of months at OpenSats where applications were getting lost.
We just got that huge donation from Dorsey, huh?
Yeah, and part of that was, so OpenSats is 100% pass through, so we don't take a cut like most nonprofits do of donations. So we have a separate operations budget that people have to donate to specifically to fund operations. And so Dorsey not only funded us for Nostr development and funded us for Bitcoin development to our general fund, but he also funded our operations fund directly. So we were able to bring Gigi on full time. And so now we actually have someone full time getting paid that lives in, like anyone who knows Gigi, like he was born for this role. And so like now all of our processes will be way more efficient, and I'm very excited about it. But anyway, I had to tell Hampus to reapply.
Yeah, but his wallet, it works similar to Phoenix. It also has an LSP, and it can do this automatically, but you can turn that off and you can do it all manually and open a channel to whichever node you want, and you get this more full manual. So it's a good wallet if you are more advanced.
Well, it's cool because it has the balance. You can do both, right?
Exactly. And it's very cutting edge on the features. It was very early on supporting all the what is it called, the Fiat Jeff stuff, where you
the hosted channels and stuff like that.
Yeah, all that stuff, and the Lightning address. You can have an address book and pay to people's email addresses.
Yeah, he did a pretty cool trade-off balance with how he implemented Lightning address on mobile. I like the idea in general of tools that kind of grow with the user, where like you have a very easy UX that maybe has higher trust trade-offs in the beginning, and then you can grow with it, right? I think Craig does a really good job with Sparrow on that. But more tools like that, so that a person doesn't have to watch a 2-hour video before they get started with Bitcoin. They can enter as a new coiner and use it in very basic ways, and then kind of grow with the wallet, right? And maybe have like different UX things that pop up, and it's like, did you know this or whatever.
Yeah, Lightning is cool, and wallets that can do both on-chain and Lightning in a
Yeah.
non-custodial
But I
way.
think I'm guilty of making more on-chain transactions the past months than Lightning transactions because of various reasons how Lightning works.
Well, if on-chain is cheaper, that's the correct decision, right?
But it's not just because it's cheaper. It's because maybe I'm having my coins in a wallet that is
Coin.
offline. Lightning, it has to be online. It has different trade-offs. So, yeah.
On-chain is awesome.
Yeah, on-chain is really good when the
It
fees are
doesn't
low.
scale though. Yeah, that's
It's
the
just
thing.
amazing. Like,
It's too bad it doesn't scale.
like you can receive offline. Like, it's just so
Exactly.
powerful.
You can do multi-sig. You can do
Like and people like I always take it the wrong way. It's like I run 5 Lightning nodes. Like if you donate to Dispatch, like it's relying on my Lightning node receiving your transactions or whatnot. Like I'm reliant on Lightning. I love Lightning. Lightning's great. But if you use Lightning extensively, you really start to appreciate what we take for granted on chain.
Oh yeah.
It's just so simple.
So it's a bit sad that in a few years from now
And
we
robust.
won't be able to use on-chain anymore. We're
No,
all
you can. It'll just be more expensive.
Oh, all right. I just have to pay
On-chain
the,
is not going
I just
away.
have to pay the market.
Well, that's the
fee.
cool part. You can always use it, right?
You can always
just
use
you have
it.
to pay the market rate.
You have to bid high enough.
Yeah.
We need to add more blockchains, and when that one fills up, we just add another one and another.
No. You move up the stack.
Are you advocating for shitcoins?
No, I'm talking about sidechains that keep
Ah.
the Bitcoin denomination, like LBTC on Liquid.
Are you shilling Liquid?
Yeah.
So like why should people care about Liquid? No one uses it.
Well, if everyone starts using it, it's not going to be like nobody's using it anymore, right?
I think
I'm using Liquid, but I have no one to use it with. So.
I think the main reason why nobody uses Liquid is because the Bitcoin mempool fee market, space market has been, basically free for the past couple of years, since 2021.
So what are the trade-offs of Liquid?
The trade-offs of Liquid
Everything
is
has
that
trade-offs.
It's a custodial sidechain, and you're trusting the Federation not to rug you.
But yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it would be something like in between the self-custody and the Cash App. The Cash App, you see your Bitcoin balance. You don't know if it's there. They can rug you. But with the case of Liquid, you can actually audit how much coins are in the Liquid Federation.
Yeah, it's much better than trusting a single
It's a
custodian.
multi-sig custodian.
Yeah.
And it's a fully auditable, because most things like Cash App, sure, they can prove how much Bitcoin they hold, but they can't prove how much liabilities they have. But with Liquid, it's fully auditable both. You can.
So why don't people use it though?
Because Bitcoin is so cheap to use on chain. Why would you make the trade-offs if you don't have to?
I think it's a network effect thing. Exchanges has been reluctant to add it, so it's hard to get it, to buy it, to exchange, to switch.
Yeah,
to it.
nobody's really built the infrastructure.
You can't pay anywhere with it. So if there's no infrastructure, and most people don't even know exists. So
I think Beefsteak Josh accepted it for beefsteak tickets.
Yeah, and he knew whenever someone paid with Liquid, it was one of the people at this table.
I wonder who that could be.
I actually made like a serious push for him to join the Liquid Federation as a member, but
the good thing about Liquid
Is that what
it's
it's missing?
exactly like Bitcoin, but it's 1 minute block time, and it's always by default confidential transactions, so you can't track and trace.
Right.
I think the most obvious,
and you can be offline. You don't have to deal with channel
just
creation. Like a lot of the pain points that we see with Lightning and high fee environment, Liquid doesn't exhibit.
Yeah, you don't
very
have to worry about
easy to
liquidity.
implement on mobile.
Yeah,
but no one uses it, and it's just an interesting case study.
I mean, as Sergey said, nobody's really using Lightning either, though, right?
I think it's different.
Cortex says stop
use
shilling
case.
Liquid. Liquid is a shitcoin.
On-chain Bitcoin is for your like cold storage. Lightning is for the payments, the SAPs on Nostr and all that tiny microtransactions. Liquid, I think, is more for the apps like Hodl. You have this lending stuff.
I think Liquid had its opportunity, couldn't find product market fit. It's not going to fucking happen. And
just wait until the fees are 1,000 sats
when the
per
fees
VByte.
are like so. I think the Fedimint. I think the Fedimint trade-off balance is a way more compelling balance, and we're going to see it kind of basically put the nail in the coffin for Liquid, because Fedimint's, first of all, it's very easy to spin up competing Fedimints that are interoperable with each other, which was always been a pain point on Liquid because it relies on the HSMs.
True.
So we've only had one Liquid network. You haven't had multiple. And then second of all, from the core premise and from the builders that are building these different front ends and building out the Fedimint open source protocol, is this idea that you make it very easy to go between Lightning and the individual Fedimints and on-chain Bitcoin and the individual Fedimints. And for whatever reason, and I'm not trying to disparage, the people that worked very hard on Liquid, the priorities were mismatched. And I know it's painful to hear if you've been working on Liquid, but it's at the end of the day, like the biggest priority should be going from on-chain Bitcoin and Lightning between the federations. And that was never made a priority. It's a pain in the fucking ass to switch between Liquid and Bitcoin. And Fedimints at their core, like they fundamentally came up with this concept of the Lightning gateway. So it's like the federations aren't even handling that swap process. It's a free market for Lightning gateways to kind of handle that swap process. So it means that anyone who's using a Fedimint wallet can easily send to other Fedimint wallets, but also can easily pay any Lightning invoice, can easily pay any on-chain address, and vice versa. And that was always the big. I mean, it was weird because like Liquid, it's just they never like realized why it could be useful. It was always like, okay, like maybe it's exchange transactions for traders, but like then they can just use extremely large Lightning private channels if they wanted to, because the custodians could do that.
Lightning can make
and so there was never any end user tooling that happened. Like it was never like, even to this day, it's just not easy to use as an end user.
Yeah, it's more for the members to use, I think, between each other.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is fine. I mean, you know, if it's I'm not saying that you should use Liquid for all use cases. It's just another tool in the cypherpunk arsenal. If the right tool for your use case and threat model is Fedimint or Lightning or Liquid or on-chain or hell, even ZeroConf, like if that's for you, great. But you want as many tools as possible.
Yeah, I agree.
You want to be able to evaluate which one to use. That's kind of like the whole point of the Mempool open source project too, is that we want to help you migrate to this multi-layer ecosystem where you can pick, should I open a Lightning channel? Should I just do on-chain? Should I use Fedimint? So it'll be interesting to see what Fedimint eventually, after that integration with Lightning and swaps and everything comes out with. But at the end of the day, it's a custodial solution, right?
Right.
I mean, someone said in the chat, like, oh, Liquid is a shitcoin. Well, what does that make Fedimint then? That's even worse of a shit. Is Bitcoin on Cash App a shitcoin?
It's they're multi-sig custodians.
Right. That's what I'm saying. But it's like, if you're going to say Liquid is a shitcoin, then what is a Fedimint? Or what is a
multi-sig custodian?
So it's kind of
Bitcoin on Cash App is a shitcoin.
It's a custodial IOU system, right? And if your threat model and use case is okay with that, then great. But if you want more privacy or security, then you use a different tool for the job, like on-chain, right?
Well said.
Cortec also said Fedimint is all third-party shitcoinery in disguise.
But shitcoinery is printing money out of thin air, right? Like a custodial service is different.
Well, you can print money out of thin air in a custodial service.
Yes, but that's why Liquid is fully auditable, so you can't, right? That's kind of the whole point.
Right.
Whereas Fedimint, I don't know if you can verify the supply as easily.
But can you, even with confidential transactions?
Yeah, because the LBTC is always auditable, right? Like you always know what the supply is, and you always know.
When like new ones get minted or whatever, that's
right. All the pagans and pagouts cannot be blinded. Otherwise, then you wouldn't be able to.
That part doesn't. Well, so on Fedimint, you don't have there's a trade-off. Like you can actually Federation operators, as currently designed, will be able to do like a soft rug pull where they're inflating supply and you won't be able to tell.
Yeah, that's
which is like a clear trade-off. The difference is like you can do that on Wallet of Satoshi right now.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, all these design decisions, like way more people use Wallet of Satoshi than they use Liquid, right? And it's because it's convenient. It's convenient. It's usable. It can pay a Lightning invoice. It can pay an on-chain address. Super easy. Liquid never figured that out. And Fedimints at the core are going to offer that. So you get like the convenience of something like Wallet of Satoshi, where you never have to manage the Lightning channel, you never have to really understand how like transaction fees work and stuff like that. The wallet handles all that for you, and then the trade-off is you can get rugged at any time, but at the very least, at least that rugging is a multi-sig custodian that is competing with other multi-sig custodians.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good.
You have privacy from the custodians
if you're like
because
a
of
new,
Chaumian Cash.
if you're total newbie to Bitcoin and the fees are very high, maybe this Fedimint wallet is a good way to get started. And you just teach them like, yeah, you don't keep 100% of your net worth on Fedimint or Lightning or Liquid. You probably keep 90+% in a cold storage multi-sig
on chain,
right, on chain. And whatever you keep in your pocket just walking around money, maybe like 1 or 2% of your money is going to be in Lightning channels or Liquid things or Fedimint things. Like if you do get rugged, that's okay, because you only lost 1 or 2% of your stack, right?
Yeah.
So we spoke about Liquid, we spoke about Lightning, we spoke about Fedimint.
I mean,
are there any other layer 2 things?
I don't. Isn't the definition of shitcoin just a token that's competing with Bitcoin? That's completely unnecessary. But if you use Liquid or Fedimint, you're just using a
custodial
IOU of Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
So you're still tracking against Bitcoin, and hence it's not a shitcoin.
The pump and dump tokenomics.
Yeah, I mean, I refuse to use any other chain. Like I don't know what they're called, but they have an own token that is just made for pump and dumping. But if you use Liquid, it's completely honest because there's nobody there just dumping on you and earning fees. It's just LBTC. It's just pegged Bitcoin. And
but there could, in theory, be an exchange rate between on-chain Bitcoin and Liquid Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
Currently, it's like a 1-to-1 peg, or maybe they take a 1% fee to swap it, whatever.
I think that's what swap services do. But
right, so
you should be able to. You can peg in and peg out without fees, right?
Yeah, but I think it's fair to say Liquid Bitcoin is not Bitcoin. It's an IOU for Bitcoin, and there could exist an exchange rate. I mean, we've seen Tether kind of go off the $1 peg, or
rarely though.
Right.
Rarely, yeah. But Tether's usually very, very trustworthy. But like other coins, just what was it? Some shitcoin Luna thing was supposed to be pegged, but algorithm.
Yeah, because
Terra,
it's not pegged.
I don't. There's something.
Well, Terra was backed by Luna, the shitcoin.
Terra,
the shitcoin.
Algorithmic stable coins. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah.
I want to talk about. I want to pull it back for a second. So we had a high fee environment. We saw a lot of stale blocks. What are your thoughts? Like, why do we have so many stale blocks? And so the idea of stale blocks is miners, two different mining pools are basically their most recent Bitcoin block is a different block, right?
It's when two mining pools solve a block at the same block height at around the same time.
So they have two different,
and it becomes
blocks.
A race.
The tip of the network is a different tip,
right? And so, if you propagate your block faster and another mining pool mines on top of your block, then you win, and the longest chain wins, or the chain with the most work wins. So the other block becomes a stale block and not part of the Bitcoin blockchain.
Well, why was that happening so much?
Yeah, I think we spoke about this on RHR a little bit.
Yeah, but basically,
get block template loop
due to so many transactions in the mempool, like 500,000 and 400,000 transactions, something made the whole algorithm of calculating the most profitable block got slowed down to up to 10, 20, 30 seconds, which just slows down the whole process of when they're mining on this block height, but while they're just calculating the next block, there's a block found somewhere else,
right?
But they're still just trying to calculate the block height, and then they're sending this to the mining machines, and they start mining on the old block. It's just all these delays because of the
sheer number of transactions just slow everything down.
So when the mempool on the mining pool operator's node is empty, it's very fast to generate the block template, which they send to the miners to work on and try and solve the next block. But when the mempool of the mining pool operator's node is full, and has 500,000 transactions, it can take 30 or 60 seconds to generate the block template.
But you can also say that the miners were ill prepared for this scenario. It would not have happened if the mining infrastructure had better performance, or maybe they had to run a smaller block max mempool limit so that they don't have this full 500k transaction to calculate.
Yeah, so they upgraded to faster hardware, or they optimized some code. I mean, some mining pools implement their own get block template algorithms, so it's not an easy, simple to say that this was the problem. I'm sure every mining pool had their own reasons why they had a lot of stale blocks, but they learned from it. I mean, they lost a lot of money, so they left that money on the table, and now they're going to go back and optimize all
But the incentives work. They
Exactly.
lost money, so now they have to figure out their shit, right?
Yeah.
But it's just what we had to do the past few weeks. We had to optimize our
What'd
stuff.
you have to do?
So the mempool.space software is constantly running the get block template algorithm to visualize the mempool as all of those projected blocks.
Mempools. Yeah.
And we have a very large mempool, and we also have a lot of advanced features in our software, like the audit functionality and making sure everything is
What audit functionality is expected block versus actual block.
right. So we have a lot
Really
of stuff
cool.
going on in our code, and our get block template loop also took a very long time to run. And so the excellent team of shadowy supercoders optimized the code very, very quickly. And so, for example, when the mempool in our nodes hit 200,000 transactions and it started to slow down, I'm like, all right, come on, guys, let's optimize the code. And sure enough, within like hours, Mononaut and Simon had all these emergency patches to make it run faster. And then once we deployed those, everything started running smoothly again. But then the next day, it's not 200,000, it's 300,000. All right, guys, let's go. We need some more optimizations. And then it kept doing like 300,000, 400,000, 500,000.
Yeah.
And we had added more servers into production. We had like turned off some other service, like got rid of some dev server, just threw everything we had in it.
And Electrum service started crashing because
well, then we had to patch bugs in Electrum server, so we kept the site up and running, but it took the whole team, working long hours.
But it's interesting how some of the infrastructure was just not built for this scenario.
That's true.
Built to handle.
I mean, Blockstream.info was down for a while too, because we run the same Blockstream Electris fork, and we had to patch very, very quickly, like within minutes even.
Yeah.
And we sent it to them, but it took them a while to, I guess, merge it and deploy it. And so it was kind of crazy to see, like, even, Blockstream with all their smart people, like there was this bug and the website went down, but fortunately we were able to prevent downtime.
Yeah, but I'm glad it happened now. It's not a bull market. It seems like if it wasn't for this ordinal stuff, the mempool would probably be empty by now. And but when the actual bull market hits and everyone's just foaming in doing Bitcoin transaction, all the infrastructure is going to be more ready.
So do you guys think Mempools will ever clear again, or?
Good question. I think it's going to clear
Just
soon.
delete your mempool.dat. There, your mempool's cleared.
No. I mean, do you think your mempool will ever clear again?
I think it will
I could clear it right now if I wanted to. You want to bet?
I'm not going to bet you.
These are already down a lot, right? Since
who? Oh, I thought you were asking me about my bets. I am down a lot on my bets, but I keep doubling down. Honestly, I paid way more on transaction fees than I've lost on these bets.
Well, if you just pay the bet as 1 sat per VByte, then it will never get confirmed.
Well, that's why Marty's a hypocrite, because he wants me to pay him in Lightning, even though he thinks clear again. So I don't even fucking know. Eventually, Mempools will never clear again, right?
Right. I agree.
Eventually, there'll be a permanent backlog queue.
I agree.
And I would say to the people that say, like, oh, then Bitcoin's unusable, it's your classic meme, like, it's too crowded, nobody goes there.
Yeah.
Like, good restaurants have a line. Like, get online.
Yeah. What's the debate?
Well, there's this new theory that Mempools always will clear eventually.
What? No.
This is why
that sounds very bearish, like you said before.
We have like Couchman wants to respond. Yeah, that's super.
Oh, we have
bearish.
A caller.
Is it guaranteed that Mempools will never clear again at some point?
Nothing is guaranteed.
I don't think it's guaranteed. So there's at least a possibility. that Mempools will clear.
There's no
I see
guarantee.
two scenarios. Either Bitcoin is going to be useful and popular in the future, and it's going to be super crowded, super high fees, or it's going to die. Nobody uses it, and then Mempools going to be empty. Choose one,
Mempools.
pick one.
I would say maybe it's maybe guaranteed is the wrong word, but maybe eventually you can be reasonably sure that you can at least get your transaction unstuck. So even though the mempool will never clear, you can at least
Mempools.
Mempools will never clear, then you can at least get your transaction out of the mempool when you want.
Matt loves to say mempools and mandibles. Those are like his two
Mandibles drink.
favorite-
Wait, what do you guys think about like transaction fee insurance or something like that? Like, do you think I like be able to like I wish right now if I could just lock in 5 sats per VByte for the rest of my life. If someone wants to take me up on that, like
Okay,
I'm willing
so-
to double down on my bet to the point where like I will pay you like 1 million sats right now, but if you're a miner, you have to confirm my transaction at 5 sat per VByte for the rest of my life until I die.
Yeah, futures markets on
Like I would do that
block
in a
space
heartbeat.
is not gonna happen, right? Because the market is too real time, and why would they sell blocks? Their future block space,
Because they can get the 1 million sats now and opportunity cost, right? It's like
but they probably get way
time
more than
value of
that.
money, whiz.
But they they probably get way more than that in the future, right? And how do you know they're even going to be
Not if
around?
they're always going to clear.
How do you know they're even going to be around in 6 months when you need to get your transaction confirmed? What if they're just unlucky and they don't mine any blocks? Like that doesn't really work, right? The only thing you can do is set a bid for your transaction, and if that's not high enough, you can increase your bid.
All I know is like when this happens, it's going to be the most expensive told you so ever because I'm going to have to be paying the transaction fees.
Everyone has to pay the transaction fees. There's no free lunch.
I know, but yeah. Okay.
Oh,
What?
I guess we can announce the announcement.
What's the announcement?
May 19th in Miami at the Bitcoin
Oh, you're pulling a
conference.
Justin Sun. You're not saying what the announcement is?
We're going to announce something related to your question.
It's pretty big.
Is it?
I mean, I don't know what it is, but if I did, it's a pretty big announcement.
I think it'd be cool. There might be a third way to increase your bid on that space in the blockchain.
It'd be cool if you could like pre-buy transaction inclusion. Like I would just be aping in right now to pre-confirm transactions.
Well, it's already kind of happening with the like the inscription guys were doing it, right? They would pay some mining pool, like in a total backroom deal,
Out of band, right?
out of band. They would say, "Yeah, we'll just give you a Bitcoin to mine our turd of a JPEG into this block." Right. And the miners, like, if I get it, if you're a small mining pool, that's like a very large bonus. So it's a free market and happens quite often. In fact, if you look at the mempool space audit tool, like if you click on any mined block, we'll actually show you like a diff between what we were projecting to be in that block and what actually got mined in the block. And those blue colored transactions are usually very large, and I don't know what the fee market looks like now. I haven't checked in the past couple of days, but there's a lot of just added transactions. And those are essentially like just this opaque darknet market of people who need their transactions accelerated and mining pools who are willing to do it for them.
Well, let's talk about out of band real quick before we wrap. Because like, I mean, we have been talking about it both on the record and off the record for years now, but it's recently entered mainstream consciousness, at least in like the enthusiastic Bitcoin community, because of these NFTs, right? So out of band transactions are, instead of sending your transaction through the mempool relay network and relaying amongst Bitcoin nodes, you send the transaction directly to a mining pool operator. And you say, I will pay you this fee, and nobody's mempools see that transaction. And it's become quite common in NFT land. But it will be very common in a sustained high fee market. I expect it to be common regardless, not just for NFTs. And how should people think about that? I know you have your audit tool, which kind of gives you this idea of which transactions might be out of band and which might not be, because it just does not make sense based on mempool vision that there would be those transactions included.
I think the main reason that the Inscription shitcoiners are using out-of-band payments to have their transactions mined is simply because there are standard rules for transactions that allow them to be propagated on the Bitcoin peer-to-peer network and included in every node's mempool. And some of the transactions are so large, they're just way too big to be broadcast and propagated. And so the only way to mine a 4 megabyte JPEG into a block is to manually send it to the miner and have them included out of band. And
it seems like the core developers like Merch sees a big issue with more and more transaction being treated out of band instead of using the actual Bitcoin network as it's supposed to, like the actual block space market.
But the
So it
thing
would be
about
better if it was all
because
open
you have
and
horrible
transparent.
fee estimation. You can't figure out fee estimation
Yeah,
if
and
everything's
that's
happening in backdoor deals.
at the
right?
end of the
Yeah.
day, like a centralized marketplace is always going to be more efficient than a decentralized marketplace, right? And so you're probably going to see more and more out of band transactions fees in the future, especially in the sustained high fee environment. Like you said, people are going to make deals to do whatever. And if you have good relationships with the mining pool, then you can do that. What does that mean?
I was giving a peace sign to a logo too, because he said it's a beautiful studio.
It is.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be many different types of shenanigans that unfold when
Shenanigans.
I mean, if we're right about Bitcoin and billions of people are using it, like, fuck your models. Like, you have no idea what's going to happen. Like, people are going to just be surprised about how everything changes. And you're all too bearish. Everyone's too bearish.
Yeah.
And I will take pie on my face because last time fees rose, I'm being much more conservative this time, because last time fees rose, I had Wiz on and I said Bitcoin fees are designed to pump forever. And then I got shat on for about 2 years or a year or something until the Bitcoin fees came
No, the
back
problem
up.
is that everyone has
They are
very high
designed to
time
pump forever.
Yeah, everyone's only looking, 5 minutes later, it's empty. You're wrong, Matt.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you got to zoom out, and on a long enough time frame, yeah, it's never going to clear again, and there's going to be huge.
It's never going to clear again. All caps. Let's
Mm.
fucking ship it.
I mean, it's not like Satoshi designed Bitcoin to have the block subsidy go to zero and the miners only being paid by transaction fees, right?
I mean, the block subsidy in purchasing power terms, like in the amount of cows you can buy, has only gone up.
How many cows can you buy with the current block subsidy?
You can buy a lot of cows, a lot more cows than you could 4 years ago.
That's true. When the block subsidy was 50 Bitcoin, that was only about $1,000 a Bitcoin or so. So it was only $50,000.
Yeah, how many cows is that? Like 50 cows?
Yeah, something like that, right?
60 cows.
But
how
now-
much is it? How much?
But
is
now
a good
if
cow?
it's like $30K a
$800,
Bitcoin,
$1,000?
even though it's only 6 Bitcoin, it's like 80 cows.
J Pleb, all caps, never will clear again. Mandibles, cheers.
Let me see.
Well, anyway, freaks, I'm looking forward to the crazy times ahead. I advise you all not to be too bearish. This thing might just catch on. And I want to thank our guests for joining us. This has been an absolute pleasure. Before we wrap up, should we finish up with some final thoughts? Let's start with Couchman. Couchman, you have any final thoughts?
Couchman.
Stay humble, stack sats.
Oh, great advice. Simon, final thoughts.
Run mempool, run Bitcoin.
Great advice. Thanks, Simon. Steve, final thoughts.
Visit Bitcoin Park in Nashville. It's been an absolutely epic week here. And if you haven't been, you should make a first visit. And if you have been, you should come again.
Cheers to that. I will say every time I'm feeling a little bit of burnout, hanging out with Bitcoiners in person, shaking hands and chilling just really gets me going.
Definitely.
I can't believe that some of my closest friends are just like internet friends that I met through the internet and then afterwards met in person, which I never thought I was going to be that person.
But that makes sense, because if you're just talking with everybody on the internet, you're naturally going to meet people that you're most aligned with out of the largest community in the world. The whole,
You're not just picking people based on geography.
right. Like your local neighborhood is not going to have that good of a selection.
Well, anyway, freaks, come visit Bitcoin Park. And if you don't want to come visit Bitcoin Park, focus on building up your local community. Strong communities will get us through the hard times. It's important to neighbors helping neighbors. I had someone accuse me on Nostr the other day that was socialism. Helping train your neighbors how to use Freedom Tech is not socialism. It is logical prudence. Consider it. Wiz, final thoughts.
We're going to announce something really cool on May 19th.
You're such a Justin.
See you all in Miami
at 1 p.m. on the open source stage.
The open source stage. What is the open source stage? Sounds awesome.
Well, will there be a live stream?
Oh, well, I mean, are we going to do a pirate stream again this year? I didn't know about it last year. It was just a happened coincidence.
Yeah, that's actually really funny how that went down. I think like we went there and we're like, what? There's no live stream? All right, you go get a camera. Let's get an internet connection, get a ladder, put it up. And
we gave 150 free open source tickets to open source contributors this year.
What was the project that had the most?
I don't know. The Nostr projects, we had a bunch of Nostr projects. A lot of Nostr projects came in pretty hot. There was a couple projects that were like, they didn't get a deal through, like, they were in the middle of negotiations with the sales team and then just kind of like aped in through the open source ticket project, the open source ticket contributor side. So it was like a little bit questionable. There was my favorite one, and shout out to Finch, Ride or Die Freak. His GitHub username, I won't dox the exact username, but his GitHub username for his open source ticket was making commits for a free open source ticket for Bitcoin 2023. And he did it right after the last conference, which is exactly what the idea is to encourage open source contributors. But like his username was like literally like, I'm doing it for the ticket. But yeah, I mean, that's what we want. The more open source contributors, the better. That's what makes this movement strong. Shout out to all the open source contributors out there. I appreciate you guys. Thank you for contributing your time and your money. Huge shout out to our guests who joined us. Huge shout out to all the freaks who joined us in the live chat. I appreciate you all. I know Dispatch runs on like this intermittent schedule. If you join our live our group chat on Matrix, you can stay up to date there. If you follow me on Nostr, it's really easy. odell.xyz/Nostr. You can find out there. I might get banned on Twitter eventually, but I'm on Twitter. I tell people on Twitter to subscribe in your favorite app. You'll get notified. I want to do more of the in-person ones, so it's going to be kind of like sporadic situations where sometimes one week we'll have 5 episodes and other weeks we'll have none. Thank you for just supporting the show and sticking with me and making all this cool shit happen. Visit Bitcoin Park. It's just great to chill with Bitcoiners. And don't overthink shit. Stay humble and stack sats. I love you all. Thanks, guys.